Hi, I'm Rick. Welcome to this episode, which as it turns out this week is not a cancellation. Okay, so not everyone deserves to be cancelled. Sometimes people do the right thing. When they do, they deserve praise and recognition, even if their good deeds are frowned upon by those who claim to have a franchise on the deed doing in question. Such was the case for NBR publisher Todd Scott recently. Todd arrested a robber, but was deflated by the response from the peelers. A little later, we'll see him execute a pretty decent rugby tackle. But first, let's hear from Todd. Watch.
G'day folks, well, we're in Auckland, Queen Street, so I was just actually getting some refreshments and some warm treats for the boys just down the road for the new office, and I was getting them from Countdown, and this massive boof of a man was abusing the staff and stealing alcohol, and I don't know what I was thinking, but I fair tackled, and there was some questions about whether or not I played rugby or not. I've dreamt about it a lot, but anyway, it was a silly thing to have done. I felt like morally it was the right thing. Pinned him to the ground for a good 10 minutes, and then the call from the cops was let him go, because you can't do that. In New Zealand, you can't actually have a civil arrest. You can't make one. So I pulled over this cop here from this car here just to say, did I do something wrong? Now they're checking to see if I'm allowed to go.
Well, I'll just grab your details and you'll be on your way, yeah?
Sweet. So, the moral of the story is, don't get involved.
Get involved. Just keep yourself safe, eh?
Right you are. There's only alcohol after all.
So, was Todd doing anything wrong by apprehending the offender? Should any of us risk intervening to stop a criminal offence? The founder of modern policing is a chap from the Victorian era by the name of Sir Robert Peel. And of course, he's the reason why police officers are also known as peelers. Sir Robert formulated 9 principles for policing, the 7th of which was this: to maintain at all times a relationship with the public that gives reality to the historic tradition that the police are the public and that the public are the police. Police being only members of the public who are paid to give full-time attention to duties which are incumbent on every citizen in the interests of community welfare and existence. It's common knowledge that latter-day peelers like to have an exclusive franchise on policing. They don't want good people like Todd paying attention to what Sir Robert thought is a duty incumbent on every citizen. But let's not rely on the opinion of the peelers. Instead, let's take a quick look at the law and find out what's what. First, it needs to be understood what an arrest is and what it's not. An arrest is simply the notional act of making someone believe that they are arrested. The civilised Peelian way of arresting someone was to touch their shoulder and say, "You're under arrest." The touch on the shoulder was to ensure that the person arrested understood it was them, not someone else that was being told of their arrest. An arrest does not include any inherent act of violence. Once a person is arrested, there is a notional restraint which stops them from simply walking away. But it is also the case that reasonable force may be used to subdue a person for the purpose of giving effect to the arrest. When force is used, you could be expected to explain why the force was necessary. For example, from the peelers, you might have heard something like this: it was a fast-moving dynamic situation that required split-second decision-making. The cell phone video does not show the full context and circumstances that our officers faced that day. It's also worth mentioning that there is no such thing as an unlawful arrest. There is no crime or actionable civil wrong of unlawful arrest. It is the force and detention that may accompany an arrest that is actionable. For example, the crime of assault or the civil tort of false imprisonment. Although the Crimes Act does not confer the power of arrest on ordinary citizens, it does confer protections on anyone, including ordinary citizens who arrest another person. The courts dealing with civil arrest cases say this: private citizens may act as they choose without legal authority, provided they do not break the law. A lack of explicit empowerment does not render their actions unlawful. I struggle with the argument that, as of right, we may act as we choose, provided we do not break the law, and there is no law broken in a civil arrest, but we have no legal authority to make a civil arrest. Nevertheless, the courts have said this: Parliament has not conferred a specific power, but clearly contemplates there will be circumstances where one citizen may arrest another. It is set out by specifying immunities, the circumstances in which such an arrest will be lawful. A caveat to the judicial reasoning is that it assumes that an arrest will involve actionable criminal or civil wrongs. As mentioned, there is no crime or tort of false arrest. Okay, so let's discuss the legal protections given to someone who arrests someone else. There are two types of protection. The first is protection from both criminal law and civil law action. This is called justified. If the arrest is justified, the citizen will have a defence to both criminal and civil action. The second is protection from criminal responsibility only. This applies only to criminal liability. You can still be sued in civil law. The court put it like this. The essence of the immunity provisions is to say that what might otherwise constitute an unlawful assault is not in certain circumstances unlawful. Recall the earlier point that an arrest was not inherently an assault or false imprisonment. An arrest is entirely notional, and it's neither an offence or a civil wrong. Okay, so which protection applies, if any, depends on the circumstances. In summary, it is not unlawful to arrest someone if you find them committing an offence that carries a maximum sentence of not less than 3 years jail, or if it's at night, any offence at all against the Crimes Act. Night is between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. It's not a criminal offence to arrest someone you find by night in circumstances which raise reasonable suspicion that that person is committing an offence. And where an offence has been committed, and you have probable cause to believe that a particular person committed that offence, it is not a criminal offence to arrest them. For the purpose of these protections, the force necessary to give effect to the arrest is the conduct, which is given immunity. This is not all there is to know, but it's a good solid street guide for a situation the likes of which Todd found himself in. There's a link to the full court decision below if you want to study the details. Now you should also know that apart from a few rare exceptions, you're not required to intervene to prevent a breach of the criminal law. Sir Robert's duty is a moral rather than a legal one. Whether you do or not is a personal choice, which requires thought about the context and, of course, your own personal safety. But if you're unlucky enough to find yourself having to step up and do your civic duty, I hope that this is helpful and that the bad guy loses. In this case, Todd did decide to act, and he literally nailed it. Watch. That's a pretty good tackle and rollover grapple right there. Now on the question of proportionality, if it's okay to use that kind of tackle on a weedy, ideologically confused but nevertheless unarmed leftard protester, it surely must be legit for a large Neanderthal armed with alcohol. We all know how dangerous alcohol is, right? So, did Todd do anything wrong? Well, he saw a large male making threats and stealing goods, which amounts to the offence of robbery. And robbery is punishable by a jail sentence well in excess of 3 years. So in those circumstances, Todd was fully justified in arresting the offender. He committed no offence and did no civil wrong. So this week's cancellation, if there was one, would go to the peelers who told Todd to let the offender go. But instead of a cancellation, this week it is my civic duty to announce that Todd Scott of National Business Review is hereby recognised and bestowed the Sir Robert Peel 7th Principal Award for Community Service to Civil Policing. If you want to know who else has been cancelled or awarded, watch more episodes right here on YouTube. Press like and subscribe to support this channel and receive notifications of new content. See you next time.